All right, next up we've got Andreas. Hello.
Hey man, how are you?
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm a VFX supervisor at Swiss International in Stockholm, Sweden. And we're mostly geared towards VFX-heavy commercials. And my background is, well, for the last 8 years or so in visual effects, mostly geared towards technical lighting. So yeah.
Right on. What are you going to be talking about today?
Well, so I've always been into Houdini, but Solaris was kind of new. So this is a little story about what happened when we tried to do a Solaris production for the first time, and kind of the challenges we faced, and the tricks and lessons we learned along the way.
Excellent. Well, let's jump in.
All right.
Right. Hello, my name is Andreas Weidman, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about dipping your toes in Solaris production. And to clarify this title a little bit, I'm going to be walking you through my first Solaris project with kind of all the mistakes we did, and kind of the fears we had about Solaris going into it, and kind of where we ended up. And so I'm gonna do some background about myself and the project, and a little bit about Solaris, and then we'll jump into the actual shot and work file. So with that said, here is the first fantastic slide. Now, so who am I? I am a VFX supervisor at Swiss International, and contrary to the name, we are not from Switzerland. We are from Stockholm, Sweden, where I was born and raised. And it's always fun with the name Swiss, because people constantly confuse us with Swiss Airlines and call us to ask where their luggage is and stuff like that. So that's a huge bonus with that name. We are mostly focused on commercials, but we do some TV shows and stuff like that now and then. So my background is about 20 years of making pretty pictures. Originally, I was graduated as an art director, and I was doing illustration and 3D work for print campaigns and stuff like that. And then I gradually moved on to motion design and product simulations and things of that nature. And it was about in 2013 that I shifted my efforts to VFX. And I ended up as a more technical lighter at another Swedish company called Important Looking Pirates, where I had some great mentors, and I had the good fortune to work on really fun TV shows such as Mandalorian, Westworld, and Fear the Walking Dead, and a lot of other cool stuff. And so today I'm more focused on VFX-heavy commercials at Swiss. And what I love about working with commercials is that each commercial is so different. Like, the work is, always changing. No project is the same. And because the deadlines are pretty short, you have to be really quick to think on your feet and come up with new solutions and utilize everything that 3D has to offer, which is kind of makes you feel alive in a sense. Originally, Maya and Cinema 4D user, but today I'm pretty much only using Houdini in combination with Redshift, which is a very sweet combo. Right, so a few notes about this talk, right? So I am not a Solaris expert by any means. There are tons and tons of fantastic tutorials and stuff out there. This is not one of them. This is more of a story of what a first-time Solaris production can look like. If you go into it without knowing much, how does that play out, sort of? How important is it to know all the ins and outs of USD before getting into it? So it's more about what to expect and kind of the challenges that may arise when you get into Solaris. And of course, the solutions and kind of workarounds and hacks that we figured out doing this very short project. And so I'll be showing you the nitty-gritty stuff, and all the mistakes are still in there. Full transparency, I did clean some things up and name them, but I've tried to leave it as it was for your entertainment. Pretty much I just hope this helps anyone if you're on the fence about getting into Solaris, but you have some questions or fears. Maybe this will help you out. So Solaris is pretty scary. It's ever since the release, which was just 2 Houdini versions ago, I think everyone agrees that it's very intriguing, but it's also brand new, and things that are new tend to be pretty scary. For a lot of companies, it's very hard to change what they're doing because you're very invested in the pipe that you have and all the tools and workflows that you built throughout the years, and you have this great knowledge base, and so to switch becomes a hassle. And that's why most studios, they kind of lag behind a few years with the software because it's just too hard to update for each version. Another thing that's scary is finding resources. So right now, there aren't a whole lot of freelancers and artists out there that know the ins and outs of Solaris, and hopefully that will change rapidly. But it's one of those things that you think about because you do have to you train people in order to use it, and so that ties in with whatever budgets will allow, sort of. Another big concern of mine was how complex USD is. Once you start learning about it, you realize it's not just a new file format. It's a big thing, and it's kind of being used in ways that you're not used to. And then you figure out that USD is really complex. The more you go into that rabbit hole, you just come out with USD glossary of terms, all these like layer structures and how USD interacts with one another, and you kind of go dizzy from it. And I personally felt that, in order to kind of start using this stuff, you needed to be some kind of USD expert. That leads me to the next thing, which is, every time you try something new, it's kind of a big investment because you need to build the pipe, you need to build the tools, you need to make it easy for the artist, you need to educate people, you need to buy licenses and stuff like that. But you don't want to do that unless you've tried it. And you can't really try it because you don't have, the pipe and resources and learning materials ready. So it becomes this kind of, Mexican standoff where you can't really try it, but you can't really invest in it either. The ever-changing VFX roadmap, you can't jump on everything. Like you have to kind of plan which road you want to choose. And as far as kind of my idea of Solaris was that it was pretty much an alternative to Katana, and would be most useful doing sequence shots. So that was something I kind of really wanted to put to the test, and I really wanted to challenge all of these, scary items and see, how scary is Solaris when you're actually in it. And that leads us to a bit of a story time here. So a while back, we got the opportunity to work on a coffee commercial. And it was only one 10-second full CG shot. And the brief was that it was going to be coffee beans, raw coffee beans, slowly being roasted in mid-air, in slow motion, kind of going from the raw bean to, the roasted dark coffee bean we all know and love, to the grounds. So we started doing some early work in regular Houdini, some previous cameras, and sculpted some beans and stuff like that. And suddenly, for one reason or another, we had our timeline being pushed, and we kind of found ourselves in a situation where all the artists, or most of the artists, were now booked on other projects, and pretty much we had 10 days and a skeleton crew to make this happen. And so I decided to jump in and do the light and comp myself on this one. And then I thought, hey, maybe this is, the perfect opportunity to test drive Solaris, And so I jumped in and kind of started reading about Solaris a little bit and did some, initial research and R&D. And I was like, hey, how hard can it be? I quickly realized that I had no idea what I was doing. I also realized that, of course, our regular Houdini pipe would not work with Solaris, and our farm submit tools would not work with Solaris. So I was pretty much stuck with, vanilla Solaris, plain out of the box. But at that point, it was already too late. I was completely obsessed about Solaris, and I really wanted to do this, and I didn't really care if I had to import manually and render locally, which is, exactly what I did for during the project until like 2 days before delivery, when our wonderful tech team managed to get farm support up and running. So for this project, there were a bunch of challenges, and I'll list the main ones here. So based on the previous plate shot, where they pretty much poured a bunch of beans out of a bag, there was about 250 beans to lay out in this shot. They all had to have some custom idle animation. When it's in slow motion, they would, turn a little bit or move a little bit. There was also the issue of this roast process, kind of morphing from the raw peanut-looking bean to the roasted one to the simulated grinds version. We also had to do some animated shaders and textures in order to make this effect work. And also we needed to have, absolute full control over all of these things. So especially when you're working with commercials, you have very little time, and you can get feedback from, the director, production company, the agency, or the end client. So it really becomes important to have, complete control over everything, so you can address the client's feedback and make them happy and give them, their vision of it within the time frame. The preceding shot had been shot in a black room, and the end shot had been shot in a certain light. So that meant once we started roasting these beans, they would become dark, and dark, almost black beans in a black room becomes a little bit tricky to see. So that was one thing to consider. The client also wanted this, massive close-up super DOF thing, which is not something you can fake in comp, or and it's kind of tricky to work with to find that, pinky size area of focus and control it throughout the shot. It's also not the friendliest to render, so that was a bit worrisome. And then we had, the rest of the USD complexities looming. So that was pretty much it. And I think now I will kind of play you the end result. And sadly, I can't play you any more than our shot for legal reasons, but I will play this once or twice, and then we'll jump into the work file. All right, so we're in the scene here. And I'm just gonna start by making a little bit more room for myself here. Maybe something like that, so it's a little bit more easy to see things. Yeah, so this is pretty much the entire scene, and I think maybe I'll just kind of walk you through it from top to bottom, and then I'll go into a bit more detail about things. Right, so up top we have our main bean assets. And everything that goes with it, kind of some different variants for it. We have our kind of scatter setup for scattering all the beans around, and some placement things. And of course, here is the big volumetric block coming in. And then some environment stuff and materials, and lastly some render nodes and stuff like that. So to start with, I had no proper clue on how to kind of build this tree. I was just like thinking of like regular Houdini or Nuke when I set it up. So I didn't have any, grand strategies, just kind of evolved into what it is. And this is not necessarily the most optimal way to to merge things in and stuff like that. There are a lot of things that you can do to have greater control of performance and stuff if you maybe place things in a different way. But this is the way it looked, and I'll go more into detail from kind of top to bottom. So beginning at the top, we have our soft crate bean here, and inside we have a bunch of different kind of beans that was sculpted, and we had a few different versions of this sculpted bean, and that we can play around with. You have to excuse my performance. For some reason my computer is not super happy about screen recording and using a remote computer at the same time. but pretty much this was made into a blend shape, and it kind of added some small transformations and animations to it. So pretty basic at that point. Right. So then we added some particles to it, and these are just some small particles that are coming off when it's kind of cracking up. And then we have the IDs for this, just as part of the masks we had to deliver to the clients. Also attached a volume that would give off some basic smoke once it kind of popped, and just scaling that. And so all of these went into kind of the same asset. So looking at the paths, they all go into the asset bean, which is the top one. So it became like a sweet little package. And then I was using these purposes for. So one fantastic thing about Solaris is that you can have these purposes. So, for instance, for this one, I've set the volumes and the particles to just show up in the render. So then in your viewport, you can actually, select what you want to see. So if you want to see the stuff that's only for render, you can. And that turned out to be a real, performance thing for me. Inside here, we have, the bean material. And it's pretty much this kind of network, and then I have this animated blend value that blends between the dark and light material. Also have sort of a workaround in this because I don't know if it's a Redshift or a Solaris thing, but these it wouldn't always allow this material to be blended. But a quick workaround for that was just to add kind of a $ expression to any field, and then that would force it to kind of evaluate every frame. So even though, like, if you check this or not, allow shader parameter animation, it would just ignore that if it was on or off. Didn't matter. But if you do that workaround, it just works either way. So that could be a good tip. Continuing down, and I'll come back to variants a little bit later. As coming down here, we have our scattering, and we pretty much just inside here as some basic scattering and setting orientations and stuff like that. And this is pretty much just like a shot in the dark. You just scatter things and see what you get. For performance reasons, I would set this to prune amount 1. So by default, nothing is actually scattered. It's all invisible. And then I would create these kind of collections of different parts I liked of these beans, and of course the ones that were in frame and stuff. And then with a configured primitive, I could then set these to be visible, which was a very practical way of dealing with things. For this part, I really wanted to have a few heroes that was manually placed. So with this duplicate, I added a few extra, and then just set a transform for each, so I could have, full control over the ones that were, really close up. Now, so here we have a little guy called Mask by Bounds, and it's disabled now because it's a little bit slow for me, but what I was using it for is that you can set this kind of object, and you can feather it and do a bunch of cool things with it, and then you can have a prim bar, or a value being sent when it hits your instances, and it can be kind of a gradual one. So I would use this, and then inside the shader I would read this value in and do some noise tweaks and shader tweaks with it to be able to get even more variations. So I'll disable this again because it's a little bit slow. All right, so addressing kind of the next problem that I had on my list or challenge was the positions. So it was kind of a tricky thing to lay out all of these beans in a way that they wouldn't kind of cover the camera move. And so I used this nifty edit node where you can pretty much move things around as you want to in the scene that you have. So it's just a matter of kind of selecting different beans and kind of move them around, rotate, and stuff like that. And, it would work pretty flawless. And because it also has the possibility to use physics in it, when I was kind of laying out the beans in the beginning, I was kind of using that to just like bump other beans out of the way and stuff so I wouldn't have collisions. So it was kind of a fun feature that turned out to be, pretty useful. And so another problem was that these beans had to have this subtle animation, like rotating and stuff. So what I ended up doing was I would copy this start position node, and then do tweaks to the ones I liked, move them around slightly, rotate them slightly, and then I would use a blend node to kind of blend this throughout the shot. Now, I have no idea if this is how things are supposed to be done, but that's kind of the beauty of having no idea what you're doing. You just kind of trying these weird things. I also use the edit nodes for tweaking for client feedback, and I found it very useful to make these kind of boxes for client feedback, so I could always pinpoint why that edit was there and why that move was done. And it turned out to be, it brought some clarity to the script, for sure. And then, of course, here comes the entire FX blocks, which I'll kind of get to. Over here we have the sort of the environment stuff. So a little bit of background, which is just a few boxes and stuff. And because it was in very crazy DOF, there wasn't really an issue of having proper built kitchen appliances or anything. It's just a few boxes. We also have our lights. And here I use the light mixer feature where you can just kind of add lights and it will pop into one of these nifty subnetworks. So the challenge was kind of tricky because not only did I have to match kind of the previous shot, that light, but I also needed to match the following shot. On top of that, I needed to, beauty light this shot. So I ended up with kind of a lot of lights that was in these kind of 3 different sections. And I found it very useful to just have this light mixer node with these collections, and then I could just play around with this and let's see if I can bring some more space. We can see names. But then it would be really useful to just solo a light, for instance. And I also think it was, really cool to kind of use the specular placement feature of the lights, so that you could really just kind of select different parts to have your lights move to where you want them. And so that was a really good trick to being able to design the kind of the lightscape. Another useful thing about the the lights was the render gallery. So I had deleted my render gallery, but I did some fake ones here for your benefit. So I would pretty much just do a test render, play around with the lights, and then I would save each one, and I kind of just use it as a big undo button. So it would be like I would just try different things and then constantly save, and then just go back through ones I liked. And that was so nice, instead of just saving different versions of files or whatever. This is a really way to do this, and this extends to a lot more than lights, of course. Right, and then we have our fantastic camera. And as far as the camera goes, I was really impressed by the Solaris camera. So because this shot involves heavy DOF, which is really hard to dial in the focus, especially when the camera has a animated move. I was very surprised and happy that the camera actually has this target for focus, which made life very easy. And I really kind of played around with these fantastic different handles that exist. So there's like a you have this so you could really see like what's in your picture at this particular moment, right? And you could have you could always set it to this kind of like frustum clipping, where you could kind of see exactly what's in focus. And once you look through your camera, it becomes really evident exactly where your focus is. So that became a huge part of my workflow when doing the focus throughout this camera move. Let's see, what else do we have? Right, and then over here we have so I'm extracting some instances here, and it's pretty much for the sole purpose of getting a few extra IDs for certain beans. And we have our material library for a bunch of different things here with kind of Redshift materials in there. And then we have kind of an alternative of the blend material, which is for these extracted instances, which were kind of special. And then moving down here, we have the render stuff, and pretty much it's this insertion point, which makes things happen above it when you add variants and stuff like that. There's also setting some IDs and things like that, and as far as the renders, maybe I'll do this one backwards, actually. So I did have 2 different renders, but they consisted of the same thing. So it's just one big render with everything, but then I did have a preview version that was just smaller and more crappy, so I could see what I'm doing and just flipping between these quick and final render settings. I also have this set range thing, which is not super useful for one shot maybe, but having this enabled makes the timeline go that way. So for instance, when working with the bean assets, you could have the timeline to be fairly smaller if you want to see that animation, for instance. And of course, for for multi-shots, this is essential to have the correct range for each shot. And then render products were something I was very confused by, but then I realized it's basically just a holder for your AVs. And so because they're ordered, I kind of put this RGB one first, and then I would just say that everything that's in the render bars category should go in there. And so in this subnet, I made a crazy amount of AVs, mostly because I wanted to try it out. So I just kind of made, pretty much all of them that was supported. I also made each one for different light groups. And then I could just disable and enable the stuff I wanted in order to have them show up in the render. So there's, of course, maybe better ways to do this. We have built our own kind of version of this where you can just kind of click and it will switch between different AVs and stuff. And of course, if you're using Karma, this is already working. So let's go up and kind of check on the variants. Right, so variance is a little bit tricky. It's super powerful, but it's also a little bit hard to understand. And you got to be a little bit careful of kind of what stuff or how you build it, because you can end up with kind of copies of your original object in each one. So I've seen, lots of different versions of this. In my case, I was getting these kind of warnings of weak variants because of how opinions work in USD. And my way of working around that at this point was just to not have it go through stage, but just have it be directly on the bean. So the original bean itself would be one variant. So I pretty much have some different material overrides here. And it's just picking up the materials and kind of inside you, some values are changed. And that goes kind of for all of them. And for the next variant set, I did a bunch of time shifts. And I know there is like offset, I think it's called offset instances. Yeah, but in this case, I wanted it as variants, so this felt like a better way to go. And these are just offsetted by a number of frames, and there's different ones. So it became very easy to to control your scene, because all I really had to do was kind of select any one and just switch the variants of it, and I could change how far it's gotten in its roasting progress, pretty much, which was very useful in terms of that quickly be able to design how fast they were transforming, if that makes sense. It was also really easy to do these material overrides to kind of design special moments, if that makes sense. So let's see. So so one thing I might want to mention is like, obviously in here I have all the FX stuff, and it's pretty much a bunch of different variants of kind of FX simulations of grounds and smoke, and some of them are transformed and time shifted a little bit to fit a little bit better, and we also have some environment dust particles here, and then I have these configured primitives to say that they're only visible for render. And I also had this cache node to kind of not have to cache them every frame when I was kind of looking for or looking through it. So one thing I might mention about like the names and the scene graphs. So at first I didn't know or understand why you would do that, why you would set the primitive path of something instead of just having the default $OS thing. But I quickly realized that if you kind of make an alternative node and copy and paste and stuff, the new node will get a 1 or a 2 around it, and then when you put that in, it will no longer work. So I would do alternative cameras, for instance, and just like copy and paste. But then now that camera doesn't have the same name anymore, and so that would break everything. But as long as I named the primitive path the same, that would always be the same in all my duplicates. So I quickly understood how useful that is, and you don't need to do it, but it's definitely something that will help you out. And especially if you do material assignments and stuff, you can do material assignments on stuff you haven't even gotten yet, on assets or FX. And then once you get them, as long as like the name matches, then they will have that material and stuff. So that was pretty much it. I didn't really use a whole lot of USD files. A lot of these kind of volumes and stuff was VDBs and regular Houdini caches. So so it's possible to work kind of without it. And then I might just put this on render and kind of show you the kind of quick previews I was able to get with Solaris and Redshift. So I would have this set to kind of viewport size, half size, denoising on, all that good stuff. And I would quickly have this, denoised soft version of whatever I was doing in seconds, which was, pretty amazing to be able to have that and to continue to work in the scene. So another trick I was using a lot was instead of jumping around and looking at different nodes, I would use the small preview window. And so with this small preview, you can have a look at pretty much anything you want without jumping around in the tree too much, which is very useful, especially for renders as well. And this would be a lot more useful for kind of multi-shots, but just being able to going in and having your kind of render view here, and if I put this to sort of the viewport render settings, where it's viewport size and kind of half size, you have this insanely fast little render window that you can play around with. So that's a very useful tactic for kind of seeing how fast it is. You just get this amazing preview in seconds. And even though it's small, you can, of course, resize this to whatever size you need to. So that's a good tip. And another good tip is to that I used was the kind of the performance monitor, to just press record and switch frames, and then you would get a good feeling about like what nodes in your scene are causing issues, and they would also be sort of illuminated in your scenes, like if there's a warning. So here we can see that the volumes and the bean blend shape are pretty taxing. So if I'm just gonna wrap this up and kind of summarize, so there's a lot of things that I would do differently. I would, of course, kind of write all these things out to use the beforehand, and preferably it would be another department kind of making these things. I think there are a lot of very useful things in Solaris that you don't really find in other places. So and I think it makes sense working with nodes in this manner, and I think it's very easy for new artists coming in to learn, because everyone kind of knows Nuke and how a node structure works. And the way we kind of set things up now is that we have our own asset nodes, which are HCAs, which are kind of for all these assets and variants and stuff. So they would be offloaded off the main scene. And same goes for these simulations. So normally that wouldn't really happen, all these time shifts and stuff. It was more of a desperate measure to to design it without having necessarily an FX artist on hand. And then for the render nodes and stuff, we have built our own, which is very similar to the Karma one. But all in all, we kind of managed to get the shot out. The final renders were about 20 minutes or something. And yeah, from that point, we were pretty much hooked on Solaris. And I'm very eager to learn more about the proper USD layering stacks and disk structure and stuff like that. So I realized that this was kind of a big thing, but I realized that Solaris was not only for sequence work or just using USD in it. So as you saw here, I was using, alembics and VDBs and all the stuff you would normally use. And I didn't really concern myself with a lot of the USD aspects of it. Now, there's a lot of benefits to do that, but it was an eye-opener that it wasn't a prerequisite for getting into Solaris. It was, of course, quite a challenge, and there's lots of things to learn, and to be honest, I'm still learning about the ins and outs of USD to this moment. So my best advice is to just start by doing it badly, like we did here, sort of. You don't need the custom tools or the pipe. You can just, like, if you have a project that fits, then just start. That's my best tip for kind of learning it. For us, it was pretty much all side effects, fantastic talks about Solaris that's available on YouTube. And the help documents are pretty well written, I think, and the forums are very kind and informative. And then other than that, it's just about being kind of curious and trying things out. And one really good thing about having no idea what you're doing is you're kind of trying and doing stuff in a way that maybe wasn't meant to be done. You just add that to your toolbox. So for us, after this test project, we decided to go full on with Solaris, and we're already in production with several new Solaris projects. And we are making that big investments of building that pipe around Solaris and all the tools and stuff like that. And to me, it seemed like it's easy enough for artists to get into once you kind of have some pipe and tools ready for them. And to be honest, it's kind of hard going back and in general, like the USD and kind of GPU universe that's expanding rapidly right now with everyone getting support for USD and render engines getting close to real time. Solaris seems to fit just perfectly in the middle of that. And so to wrap this thing up, personally I can't wait to see what the next few releases of Houdini will look like, because I think they have the right idea about things. And with that said, I want to thank you all. My name is Andreas, and if you want to reach me or ask me any additional questions, you can always send an email to andreas@swiss.se. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of FMX, and take care, everyone.